Investor Intelligence provides general information only. You should consider seeking independent advice to see how this information relates to your unique circumstances. Please refer to the terms and conditions available at investorintelligence.com.au for more.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Investor Intelligence, brought to you by the team at the Property Mentors. It's your weekly podcast for all things investment and hosted by me, Phoebe Sikowski-Wallace. So it's been a while since we've had a conveyancer on the show. The last time we had one was the wonderful Brandon Willis, who did a fantastic job of teaching us what a conveyancer does, their importance in your team of experts, and how they differ from, say, like a solicitor. So it was a bit of a 101. But I thought it was time to get one back on the podcast to revisit that topic. So it is my pleasure to welcome Jason Colbey, an incredible conveyancer from Imperial Property, who specialises in conveyancing in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. Welcome, Jason.
That's the best intro anybody's ever given me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So, Jason, can you start? You've had quite an interesting career journey thus far. Can you start off by telling me about that career journey and how you kind of got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So you're right. It has been very interesting, very different. But the one key focus has always been property. Mm-hmm. So very passionate about property. Started off very early days as a property manager, which I tell you to this day, property managers have my utmost respect for everything they do. They do an incredibly difficult job and don't get anywhere near enough credit. So they will always have my respect, property managers. I then moved out of property management and went into tax depreciation, which was fantastic. It was one of those things that nobody knew about, but was incredibly important. So loved it. I was incredibly passionate about that and still am, even though I'm not in it. It's one of those things where I'll spread the word as much as possible because it'll always help investors. Was lucky enough to then move into property data for one of the big providers here in Australia, where we could do property data and API integrations for corporates and governments. We dealt with real estate agents in the integration phase, but more so corporates, governments, forecasting partners and things like that.
Right.
I then took a bit of a sidestep out of sales and went into marketing for one of the prominent brands here in Victoria, for one of the prominent real estate brands, and run their marketing for a little while at a corporate level, and have since thought, what haven't I done that's super exciting? Conveyancing. So we'll jump into conveyancing and give it a go. But no, it's been amazing. I've always been around every part of the property transaction process and have a solid understanding of it. And when the role came up for Imperial to come over and help people with their conveyancing and bring something different to the industry, I had to jump at the opportunity.
Yeah, you've really covered all bases, or you can't escape property. I don't know which one it is.
It's one or the other. I mean, really, you can say you love it, but can you get out of it? Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
But no, I genuinely do. It's really important, and it's something people are super passionate about, and hopefully in everybody's life they will transact it, and if they won't, well then they'll rent, and the transactions will be slightly different. But property is inevitable, isn't it? It's everywhere and it's always going to transact, and people need a place to live. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it. It's just such a great topic.
So what were some of the key takeaways from each role, or any particular role, that you've sort of taken away from them?
The key takeaways, and I can't stress this enough, as unimportant or as unsexy as something appears, like tax depreciation was probably one of the best examples I could throw in here. Was one of those things where nobody knew about it. It was incredibly important. And then when you tried to explain it to people, they heard the word tax and shut down immediately because it's not exciting. Nobody wanted to hear about it. But it was, I remember when I was there, I used to start every presentation or every talk to a business with the stat that I learned along the way, which was It's the second largest deduction you could make in an investment property, and 80% of investors don't know about it.
Wow.
And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so I used to start every conversation that way. And if I was lucky enough to be in a room where everybody put up their hand because they knew about it, great. If I was lucky enough to be in a room where nobody put up their hand, great, because they would leave with that knowledge, even if they took the smallest little bit of information away, because when you talk about tax, you just open up this huge can of worms in terms of information. It was lovely for them to walk away and say, you spoke for 45 minutes and I remember you said this, so I'm going to go and talk to my accountant. Or I remember you said this, I'm actually going to give you a call. Can you just explain that in a bit more detail? And as long as they took something away that was going to benefit them throughout their investor process or their journey, well, then that was a win for me.
Yeah, a lot of the members I've spoken to, that I think tax depreciation was one of their favourite things that they've learnt about, because they either didn't know anything about it beforehand, or they knew the sort of term tax depreciation but didn't know any of the ins and outs of it.
No, and what's amazing is when I used to speak to people, they would automatically link tax depreciation to, oh, that means I'm going to pay more tax. Or you hear the word tax, it's a bad word, right? So people would, unless they were career investors or unless they knew they were business owners who knew that taking a loss and spending money was actually a good thing for you and in these certain situations, if they were your mum and dad investors who had properties that were ideal for tax depreciation, that could give you an amazing leg up come tax time, they had no idea about it. And the fact that it was there, it was available, and it was super easy to get, and people still didn't know about it.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It's crazy.
So through all those roles, I'm kind of interested, like, we talk about this cycle that the property market goes through. Through these different roles, were there aspects that you have seen kind of time and time again?
There really, when you focus on the property cycle, I tend to kind of only focus on the booms and the slumps, because that's where it hits the market the most. Sure. So either things are going to be going really, really good or really, really bad. And the most common theme in each one is whenever there's a boom, it's that fear of missing out, isn't it? And we saw that with COVID, right? Where interest rates are really low. People couldn't go anywhere. People had a bit of extra money, and money was a bit easier to get from banks, and properties were all over the place for sale because people were getting these great prices. So we saw everybody kind of not wanting to miss out on that boom. A really great example is years ago, there were proposed changes, or there were changes to the first home buyers grant, where the government wanted to push people towards new builds, right? So if you were a first home buyer buying an established property, you got, don't quote me on these numbers, but let's just say it was $7,000. But if you built a property, so if you got a first homeowner's grant to lock into a house and land package, it was like $14,000.
Right.
And at that time, I'll never forget, at that time, I witnessed people, friends, family, connections that I had, who had their very fixed mindset on, I want this property in this suburb, to, yeah, but if I can get double the grant to go out there and get a brand new house, that's what I'll do. So there was that fear of missing the extra money. And then there was talk about them taking it away. So people wanted to get in quick before they took away the bonus, before they actually took away the first homeowner's grant. There was lots of speculation at the time. So again, that fear of missing out. Let's buy now so we don't miss it.
Yeah.
Whereas the slumps, it's more of that fear of buying early. Like I don't want to buy it now. Again, COVID, great example. I don't want to buy now because interest rates are going to go up, or I don't want to buy now because everybody's telling me property prices will come down. So people are kind of sitting on their hands, and as a result of them sitting on their hands, people who are looking at selling their properties, there's not a high level of demand. So therefore the price isn't going to jump. So people are now looking at possibly even sitting on their properties. They're in the area that I live in. During COVID, I'm being in and around property. I made sure that I went to every auction in the area so I could see how the market was affecting my area. And I don't live in a huge area, so it wasn't impossible to do. And I watched houses that were worth nowhere near what they sell for ridiculous prices.
Wow.
And as a result, now you're seeing the consequences of those kind of rash decisions of, doesn't matter, it's only another 50,000, let's just buy. And with interest rates going the way they are, quite a few of those houses now are coming up for sale again. And what I've noticed is because they can't get the prices they need, the sales board comes down and the lease board goes up. So people now are kind of sitting on their hands. The rental market now is exploding because low stock and high demand. So that's what I've seen, is just that there's that whole, let's not buy too early. Let's not sell too early. Let's not discount ourselves. And a lot of that is, you see what's happening with everything that's going on. A lot of that is also misinformation, people taking advice from the wrong people. The amount of people I've spoken to who have said, but if I hold out for another 12 months, house prices are coming down 50%. You think, who's told you that?
Yeah.
That's still, I don't agree with that at all. And I haven't even heard that one, but they're listening to people who are hearing it from somebody who's hearing it from somebody who read it off Wikipedia or something. And it ends up kind of causing that panic, doesn't it? I can just wait. And it's like, let's say they do go down slightly. Interest rates are probably going to go up anyway, which means the cost of your money is going to be more expensive when you do go to buy. But yeah, it's that whole having the right information can kind of get you through those cycles, because they're coming. I mean, if you look at the data, and you'll hear me say this, and it's another non-sexy topic that I'm really passionate about. I love property data. If you look at the data, the cycle generally goes around every 5 to 7 years. So it's coming back. But what causes it, anything, COVID, nobody could have anticipated it. The first home buyers grant, we need to look at this and get this and boost this and do this. When I was in depreciation, they made changes to the depreciation of what you could claim. So basically the rules around what you could claim. And as a result, we saw a lot of people shifting away from a certain property type and moving towards other property types.
Okay.
So that affected it. The RTA, the government changed the RTA. So making minimum standards for rental properties, which has affected the rental industry. It just depends on certain situation and what comes up. And, you look at COVID, and I think COVID hit 5 years. I think it was a 5-year cycle for COVID hit, or a 4-year cycle, which is a lot shorter than what the other data I've read has shown. But nobody could have predicted COVID was coming. It was a once in a lifetime thing for people in my age bracket. So it various factors, but it's coming. If you read the data, I saw you had Dr. Nicola Powell. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah,
of Dr.
she's
Nicola.
amazing. Yeah,
she is an amazing analyst, and most of the data I read is from Domain.
Yeah,
and if you just look at it, it's coming. You just don't know what is going to be the reason for it coming.
Yeah, you're so right. The whole we had an episode last week about the people that are kind of sitting on the sidelines and I'm just going to wait till property prices drop.
You're like, look, it's one of those things where it's like hindsight, isn't it? Hindsight is a beautiful thing. Like it's my most hated quote, because it is a beautiful thing, and everybody gets to a certain point in their life where there's 5 or 10 things where you think, oh, if I knew that, if I just knew that. And it's one of those things where it's like investing in anything, isn't it? It runs at a really high risk, where you say, I can hold off on the hope and dream that this is going to happen. And then when it probably doesn't, and money's harder to get, and interest rates are higher, and cost of living goes up, and wages don't increase. Like, there are so many different factors that can affect it. You could potentially be worse off waiting in 2-3 years.
Exactly.
So, and people don't think about that. They think about that, I've been told this, so I'm going to hope for that, because my cousin's brother's uncle's barber said to him that house prices are going down by 50%. And it's tricky to do, but it's like anything in life. You take that risk. People will take a risk to buy now, hoping that they're not going to lose their property due to financial stress. People will take the risk of waiting for 3 years for property prices to go down a ridiculous amount of money, and they'll pay off or they won't. That's as simple as it is.
The way you talk sometimes, I'm like, do you work at the Property Mentors? You're really quite aligned with what we say there.
I love it.
So I'm quite fascinated by your time in property data specifically, and kind of what you've seen in the Australian market. So you worked for more of like a government standpoint of it?
Yeah, so my key clientele were corporates and government is who I dealt with. And it was interesting. And what was interesting mostly about it was that I entered the business pre-COVID, and mid-tenure COVID happened. So it was one of those things where data is data. People need it. There's forecasting that needs to be done. People need to do CMAs for real estate agents or whatever it be. The need for data is always there in certain industries. And what I found was we were dealing with, anybody from sole operator valuers right up to huge government bodies like political parties, huge forecasting businesses and all the rest of that. And what I found was pre-COVID, the need for data just kind of trickled, and it was always the same data.
Okay.
So it was always sales data. That's all people generally cared about, purely for forecasting what my development is going to be worth, what this property could be worth. That's basically what it all came down to. COVID hit and just threw a spanner in everything because like every other industry, nobody knew how it was going to affect them.
Yeah.
What we found was, and it was heartbreaking, well, this is what I found here in Victoria, was all of the small businesses that were, your sole operators or whatever they be, dried up completely because they lost business, lost jobs, lost contracts, whatever they be. The government side of things, so the larger scale side of things, so your government and consultants and all the rest of that, ended up ramping up what they needed because what was important at that time was figuring out what's going to happen. And you're dealing in an area that is incredibly uncertain with people who do not like uncertainty. So it surprised me because, again, you don't know what to expect and you're doing whatever and selling subscriptions to, whoever it be. And then to see this huge ramp up of people saying, well, no, our clients need to know what the next 3 years could possibly look like. And to figure that out, we need the last 15 years of data for something specific.
Yeah.
We need your help. And it was like, okay, yep, great. So ended up helping all of those guys out. And what I found ramped up even more was rental data. So we never really had a huge demand for rental data because the way data works is there's verified data from the government and then there's data that's collected in other avenues and things like that. And rental data was something that not a lot of people needed unless they were doing estimates or kind of, I guess you can say, like rental valuations or anything like that for clients. And that exploded, which completely took me by surprise. Wow. I wasn't expecting it. But in saying that was a great thing because people were thinking outside the box.
Yep.
We need to look into X, Y, and Z now, which we would not normally have done. But right now we need as much data as possible to figure out what the next 5 years is going to look like because we've just been shut down. We've just been locked down. We can't go 5Ks from home. We can't have anybody in the office. We can't do this. We can't do that. And from a property standpoint, it completely shut down the industry.
Yeah.
And everybody needed to know when it was going to get better, how it was going to get better, and by how much it was going to get better.
Right.
And data played a huge role in that.
Okay. And what things were the government interested in knowing about the property industry, and are there reasons why they were looking at that?
Yeah. So do you know what's funny? It was more so around that COVID time where I noticed kind of a shift in specific data. And what we noticed was there was that demand for rental data. So we speak about verified data and non-verified data. Sales data is verified by the various states' valuer generals, whereas rental data is not.
Okay.
So sales data passes through and comes back. Rental data doesn't. And what we found was for non-government bodies, there were a lot of forecasting firms that were working with builders who were saying, people can't come through our properties to look at them, so we can't sell them. What about if we rent them all and then we'll sell them, with tenants in? And as a result, these forecasting firms that would generally value a build were trying to value rents and find out what the rents would be worth for these builds, which was amazing. It was completely out of the box. Never thought of it before and thought it was amazing that nobody had thought of this before.
Yeah.
So that ramped up. What I noticed from a government standpoint was things like elections come up and we're working a lot with local area governments that were saying, hey, we'd love to know how often properties have transacted, not who's in there, not how much it doesn't matter. We need to know that in the last 3 years, that property's actually been rented twice. And the reason for that is because at our last election, they may have been one of our supporters. At the next election, they may not. So we have to be able to market to these people. We have to be able to send our collateral out. We need to know. And if we know that a suburb, 90% of the properties have transacted, but in the last election we won by a landslide, we might need to know that information because it might be different people. Which, again, completely out of the box. And I loved it because it is research.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence. That's what it's all about.
Here at The Property Mentors, we have decades of experience investing in property. We know what to look for and what kind of impact it can have on your portfolio. We have access to brokers, accountants, and property managers to make sure your portfolio performs. Visit thepropertymentors.com.au to learn more.
So let's talk about conveyancing, because you
Yes.
are now a conveyancer.
Let's do it.
I must ask, are all conveyancers the same?
Look, the process is the same. Okay. So, and I say this to everybody, that basically the minute the conveyancing process starts, for whether it's a sale or whether it's a purchase, the same boxes are going to be ticked. It all goes through the same software and the same, everything is done the same, basically. Okay. If it's a 30-day settlement, doing it in 15 days isn't going to win you any brownie points. You get it done in 30, 60, 90, however many days, right? What is the key difference really is the extra on top of that, if that makes sense. So the experience you have, the service you get, the level of communication, that they're the key points of differences. And, we generally, that's the driving force behind my role with Imperial, is we really do have to focus on communication, customer experience, making sure that the collaborations are there between our referral partners so everybody feels supported, because that's what it's all about. I mean, conveyancing is that thing that you trust somebody to do, and it's for a very large transaction, and you kind of just hope it gets done when it's supposed to get done. The conveyancer's not going to call you at every step of the way and say to you, oh, hey, just letting you know we're going to do this. Is that okay if we do this? And the whole idea behind a conveyancer is to basically take away all of the stress associated with settling your property. That's why you go to a conveyancer. I mean, they're the ones who legally transfer titles over of properties, but in all the property I've bought, being able to hand over to a good conveyancer and not worry about it, not have to know everything about it, is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you do. Like, you want to feel supported. You want to have that confidence to know that I'm not seeing this thing happen every step of the way, but I know it's happening.
Yeah. Well, especially when it comes to legally binding contracts, for sure.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And it's generally going to be one of the largest transactions you make.
Yeah.
You don't want to be kind of hoping and wishing things are going to go well. You want to feel confident knowing that, hey, if I pass it over, I'm going to get updates. I'm going to know where everything's at. But I'm also not going to stress that things are just going to be missed or things just aren't going to happen when they should, because I'm still dealing with the bank to get the money. I'm still dealing with X to do this. I'm now looking at selling my house. There are so many other things you have to focus on. Take that out of the equation, one less stress you have to worry about.
Yeah, I was going to ask, kind of how do you differentiate between, say, the right conveyancer or just another conveyancer, but I think you've answered that well of, it is the same process, but there are these sort of extra elements that you need to look for.
Absolutely. And it's like we focus on really the 3 C's at Imperial, and that's communication, connections, and confidence. So, one of the things we offer are free contract reviews for our referral partners. And the reason why we do that is because we want your clients to have the confidence in their purchase, or have confidence that their sales contract, will be done correctly, whatever it is. So from a purchase perspective, let's look over it. Let's ease your mind with all this legal jargon that's in there that you probably don't understand.
Yeah.
And we'll basically make you feel confident enough to leave that conversation to say, yes, I'll put in an offer. And if my offer's accepted, great, I'm happy with that. We look at connections. So there's different parts of the property transaction process, isn't there? And things can go wrong. So you may need an introduction to somebody. There's another value-added service. And again, it's not something everybody offers, but it's something that's there and it's important. Like if something drops that could potentially run the risk of not settling your property on time, well, then let's bring in one of our trusted suppliers of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
See if we can help you out. And then there's communication. I am a big fan of set and forget. Like, please just take it away so I don't have to do it. But I also need to know where you're at. So I just don't want to stress. I don't want to get to 3 months down the track and say, oh my goodness, is settlement is supposed to be in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or is it 2 weeks? I don't want to be that person.
No.
So communication is a big thing as well. So, and that's what's good about implementing these 3 C's in Imperial is it's basically my job to do all 3. So I'll answer the phone, I'll introduce you to people, and I'll set up those contract reviews just to make sure that you feel happy and you're confident with the process, because that's what it's all about, isn't it?
That's probably another good sign, as opposed to just handing everything over and hoping everything's all good, but that
absolutely.
you are sort of teaching them along the way the jargon and all the stuff that they need to know, because this is still their purchase, their journey.
Exactly right. And look, the contract reviews are a big thing for me, because you may have a contract that is perfectly normal, perfectly above board, special conditions, general conditions, all the rest of that, and that's great. But if there's one thing in there that the client has read over and they don't understand, it can be a deal breaker. So we had a mortgage broker reach out to me and say, hey, I've been working with this guy forever, and he's found this property he loves. He's got the finance, everything's great, but now he wants to pull out of the deal because he's read the contract with a friend of his or somebody, and he's read this clause that he's misread it, and he doesn't believe me. I'm telling him that that's just standard and you don't have to worry too much about it. He goes, but can I pass them on to you? And I said, yep, no dramas. So ended up passing them on to us. We did the contract review, and that's what it was. It was 15 minutes of let's just explain what you don't need to worry about. Yeah. And then half an hour of, so what have you read that's giving you concerns? Because we're telling you this is fine, and we're happy with you putting in an offer with this contract. But is there anything in here that concerns you? And that then gives them the opportunity to say, I don't know what that means. And it might just be a standard clause in any contract. I don't know what that means and it's worrying me. Okay, it's this. Great, fantastic. That's where the peace of mind comes in. We can fill you with confidence to know you're making the right decision by putting in this offer. Yeah. And that's probably one of the most important things. For sure. And we see a lot of property deals flying around, and we help facilitate the communication between vendors, buyers, and then the conveyancer. Yeah. And we've seen the impact of not having the right conveyancer and what that can have, on your deal, and how all the small details turn into really big things when it comes to settling on a property. Have you got any horror stories of someone undervaluing your service? So yes. And it's
yes, I do.
when it comes to anybody undervaluing your service, they'll generally undervalue your service because they don't understand it. Yeah. Right? And when they don't understand it, there is the automatic assumption of, well, you all do the same job. Right? And as a result, they then look at the overvaluation of your service because the only thing that matters is price, right? So it's the same in every industry. You get what you pay for. And everybody says it, nobody believes it until you go down the path of actually experiencing what cheap and nasty is. But yeah, I met up with this mortgage broker, and I ended up getting these guys on board as referrals. And I got a phone call. I think it was a Friday. And this mortgage broker was just in a bit of a tizzy. So he was like, look, I've got a client. He's not going to use you, but I need a contract review. Like the auction's this weekend. We haven't been able to get a review. Please, can you do this favor? And I was like, yeah, no worries. So we got this contract review organized on the day, helped the guy out. It was very above board. Everything was fine. But it was more so for the confidence to go to the auction. He then left. The mortgage broker was very thankful and again reiterated that we would not get this guy's business. And I was like, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Because the person that he was going to, I can't remember how much cheaper he was, but he was cheaper. And I said, okay, no worries at all. And so left that, ended up speaking to the mortgage broker. So constantly referred business to each other, which was great, and kept working together and built a really good relationship. And it was about 4 months later, this guy reached out to me and said, that property, that name, and I couldn't remember the guy's name. I'm like, who's that? And he goes, I remember the guy I called you when we first spoke. I said, yep. He goes, well, I had a conversation with him because we had a bit of dramas, like getting him settled. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, mate, he didn't go with you because, throw a number out there, you were $300 more expensive, right? He goes, but his settlement was delayed. And with a delay in settlement comes penalty interest. So you have to pay if your settlement is delayed. And as a result of the delay in his settlement, and he ended up paying what would have been probably more than $1,000 if he'd have just gone, say, with us or maybe with somebody else. And you look at that and you think, like, don't undervalue a service, because, you know, for the sake of $300, you could potentially find yourself. And this is not something that happens all the time. This is something that was completely, you know, nobody could have expected this. But as a result, it's like you've actually found yourself out of pocket more because you tried to save a little bit of money at the start.
Yeah.
And they're the horror stories I see, where it's like, don't just focus it on price, like focus it on what you're getting for that. Like, look at the value. Not the monetary value, look at the total value of that transaction.
Yeah, Luke has a saying, it's like, when it comes to products, get the best price. When it comes to service, get the best value.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. Do you ever see the opposite, where people just kind of want to get things over and done with and they just want to sign and they haven't even read the contract?
Oh, yes. So, full disclosure, guys, if you're buying a property, get the contract reviewed before you sign the contract. Can't stress this enough. I've only ever seen it one time where we've had somebody send us a fully signed contract to read, and there were some things in there to be wary of.
Yeah.
But yeah, please get all that stuff done before you're locked into anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing. A pen, ink, and a piece of paper can lock you into something for a very long time.
Yeah.
Just cover yourself so you are confident enough to know that when all is done and dusted, you've gotten what you want, and it hasn't led to any headaches.
Yeah, exactly. No, have those conversations for sure.
Do it first.
Don't rush yourself. I know you want to get it. I know you want to make money quickly, but don't rush yourself.
Exactly.
So, Jason, just to wrap up, this has been amazing. Can you leave us with, what are some of the things that are usually in people's contracts that they should be mindful of to mitigate their own risk when it comes to purchasing property?
Look, when it comes to mitigating your risk, and I've said this probably half a dozen times, is get the contract reviewed. There are general conditions, special conditions, certain things in contracts like subject to finance clauses and things. Just get it reviewed. Like just make sure that when you do sign that little line at the bottom of the contract, that you're protected as well.
Yeah.
It's everybody can love property. Everybody can be emotionally invested into property. Investors cannot be emotionally invested and just see numbers and everything and all the rest of that. But at the end of the day, it's a huge transaction. It's a huge financial commitment, and it is a very lengthy commitment to a bank. So you want to make sure that from the get-go, that piece of paper that's going to lock you into everything when it comes to this property is good for the vendor, but good for you too. So please just look after yourself. Do diligence. Cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
So we are Imperial Properties. So the website is www.imperial.com.au. LinkedIn is probably the best way of getting in contact with me and the business. It's the easiest way to find all the information you need. So Jason Colbey, Colbey, guys. Everybody forgets the E. But yeah, feel free to jump on, add me, and any questions you have or any way I can help you in any way, shape or form in regards to conveyancing, happy to do so.
Yeah, I'll make sure to link all those in the show notes as well.
You're a superstar.
But thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Had a great time.
If you found this episode or any of our episodes helpful, please make sure to share and leave a rating to help us reach more people on their investing journeys. And of course, subscribe to be notified when new episodes drop. Make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram @Investor Intelligence Podcast. You can find links to our other socials in the show notes, including a link to the Property Mentors weekly blog. If you're ready to get your property portfolio in shape for financial freedom, check out Luke's latest book, Property Fit. You can get yourself a copy at www.propertyfitbook.com.au.